For the next year, in the lead up to America's 250th birthday, we'll be exploring the history of our country in a new series called These United States. Our year-long journey begins at the Statue of Liberty. Who plays her in the movie?
Meryl Streep.
This is Lonnie Bunch, Secretary of the Smithsonian Institution. And we're looking at a model of that American icon, the Statue of Liberty, whose origin story may surprise you.
When this idea began, it was really about liberty. It wasn't about immigration.
That's right, says Bunch. Lady Liberty had nothing to do with immigration when she was first proposed in 1865.
The United States had ended slavery. And so that's why, if you look, she's standing on the chains and shackles.
But it would take more than 2 decades for the idea to be realized. While the statue itself would be paid for by the people of France, the Americans would be responsible for its prodigious base.
Almost anything you do involving culture or art, you got to raise money for.
And so this model came to our shores in 1883, 3 years before her full-sized sister, to drum up support. She stood in the Capitol Rotunda to no avail. Congress declined to foot the bill.
Many people in the United States thought, what is this? Is it a New York City thing? And why should we care about it if it's just New York City?
Some things never change.
That's true. That's true.
One supporter, 34-year-old poet Emma Lazarus, concerned about the plight of Russian Jews seeking asylum in America, penned a sonnet called The New Colossus for a fundraising auction. In it, she imagined Lady Liberty as a mother of exiles, welcoming the huddled masses through the golden door to America.
It's a great poem. It's important. But it really became, more than anything else, the best way to understand the possibilities of immigration in America.
But at the time, the poem got little notice. At the statue's dedication in 1886, not a single speaker mentioned immigration. But Lazarus's poem turned out to be a prophecy. In 1892, within sight of the statue, America's first ever immigration facility opened, Ellis Island.
There are stories of people pulling into this harbor, seeing that symbol, and just dropping to their knees and weeping.
By the 1920s, more than 12 million immigrants from Europe had come through Ellis Island, according to author and journalist Jia Lin Yang.
Very few people were turned away.
No documentation
needed. No
needed.
documents. If you can get to the border, you're in.
But, says Yang, not all Americans were prepared to welcome them.
You have to remember the country is still relatively small at this time. So it's pretty shocking to the American people to have millions of people showing up from Italy, Eastern Europe, different religions. They're Catholic, they're Jewish, different foods, different languages.
Sitting here in 2025, it's by strained credulity to, imagine that people back then thought that Italians couldn't assimilate.
That's right. But there were people were writing columns and long essays saying, these people don't belong here.
And so in 1924, President Calvin Coolidge signed the Johnson-Reed Act, which created a system of ethnic quotas that essentially banned immigration from countries outside of Western and Northern Europe. It was the first major immigration restriction since 1882's Chinese Exclusion Act, which barred the entry of Chinese laborers. But the 1924 law didn't apply to countries on this side of the Atlantic.
The thinking was, these are our neighbors. We need to make it feel like they're welcome to come and go.
So even during this period, there was no such thing as an illegal immigrant from Mexico, say?
No.
But for more than 40 years, through a global depression, a world war, and the Holocaust, the door was virtually shut to everyone else.
So by the time we get to the 1950s, are there just no immigrants?
The numbers are getting smaller and smaller. Talk to somebody in 1955, they're like, yeah, immigrants, that's old news. And that would have been the case forever and ever, except that for 40 years, a group of lawmakers and activists felt that the law was discriminatory and they wanted to change it.
Among them, Brooklyn Congressman Manny Seller. He voted against the 1924 quotas as a first-year rep, and for decades fought to make America more welcoming to immigrants. Then, in 1958, a Massachusetts senator with his sights on the White House published a pamphlet calling for a change to the nation's laws. John F. Kennedy's A Nation of Immigrants would introduce the now ubiquitous phrase.
The book is trying to establish almost a new American history that says, these people who came, decades ago, you may have forgotten them. This is what makes America American. It's the fact that we are a nation of immigrants.
Which is new to a lot of American ears.
Yes.
After Kennedy's assassination, at the height of the Civil Rights Movement, the reformers, including Manny Seller, who was still serving in Congress, seized the moment.
We're now going to get this bill through, for which I've been fighting for 40 years in the Congress.
And on October 3rd, 1965, at where else? The Statue of Liberty, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Immigration and Nationality Act, which ended the ethnic quota system.
Those who do come will come because of what they are and not because of the land from which they sprung.
But even the law's most ardent backers didn't anticipate just how many people would end up coming from all over the world. Since 1965, when that law went into effect, the share of foreign-born people living in America has slowly crept up to about 14% of the U.S. population, roughly the same as it was back in 1924 when the ethnic quotas were imposed.
This law really transformed the whole country. And if you meet somebody and their family's from Africa, the Middle East, Asia.
You're here because of what was signed on that island.
Yeah.
In a twist, the 1965 law limited immigration from Mexico and the rest of the Americas, setting the stage for the illegal immigration crisis at the southern border. But it also allowed Jia Lin Yang's own parents to come to the U.S. after escaping the Civil War in China, a fact she hadn't realized until writing a book about this chapter of the immigration story.
When I looked into this history, I really understood how contingent my family's presence is here. I took it completely for granted, right? Grew up steeped in Statue of Liberty, Emma Lazarus poem, Nation of Immigrants. Of course we were allowed to come here. It's a nation of immigrants.
Did your parents feel lucky?
I think they felt deeply lucky. I have 2 children now. Our family's entire story changed because we were allowed to come here. And now everything after me in the family tree is an American story.
Her posture, her demeanor, she's not a warrior.
But she is powerful.
And that power, says Lonnie Bunch, remains undiminished.
Is it fair to say that the immigrants themselves are the ones who gave it this meaning?
They imbued it with this notion that this is a symbol of the possibility of America. That's why I call it a statue of promise.
Who do you think about when you think about New York? I think about her. I think about her.
And now, a chapter in the story of these United States. This is Lee County. It was likely the most important land deal in history. More than 800,000 square miles of wide open space that went for about 2 cents an acre, bought largely sight unseen by the buyer, Thomas Jefferson. The president wasn't really seeking all that land at first. All he really wanted for the United States was the valuable port city of New Orleans, then controlled by the French. Turns out Napoleon Bonaparte needed money for his wars in Europe, and that vast territory known as Louisiana, named in honor of King Louis XIV, was a drain on his resources. So, in 1803, he sold the whole lot. Lakes, rivers, forests, and prairies. Lands from the Mississippi to the Rocky Mountains. For $15 million. Our U.S. envoys in Paris, James Monroe and Robert Livingston, were stunned. And without even asking permission from the president, they signed on the dotted line. As our Charles Kuralt once mused,
Livingston didn't even know what he was buying. Lewis and Clark hadn't yet been west to see what was there. But they signed the papers before Napoleon could change his mind. The United States was suddenly doubled in size.
it was, of course, already home to Native Americans who had no say in the matter. Thousands died trying to keep their land from westward moving white settlers. It was manifest destiny tested, and America's expansion wasn't over yet.
And now, another chapter in the story of these United States. This is Connor Knighton. It was negative 34 degrees when I visited Yellowstone National Park, but a smile would have been frozen on my face no matter what. America's first national park was my last stop on my 2016 quest to visit every national park, from Acadia to Zion. Ulysses S. Grant never visited Yellowstone, but as president, he signed the Yellowstone National Park Protection Act into law in 1872. None of the members of Congress who voted to preserve the land had ever seen it in person either. What they had seen were incredible photographs and paintings from expeditions to present-day Wyoming. Explorers shared sketches and stories, informing officials of a wonderland already well known to Native American tribes of the area. A place unlike anywhere else in the world. In any season, Yellowstone is magical, home to dramatic canyons and pristine lakes, geysers and hot springs. The park is also a safe haven for species including what wildlife watchers have deemed Yellowstone's Big Five: elk, moose, grizzly bears, wolves, and bison. But Yellowstone's legacy isn't about what it contains, it's about what it represents. Set aside for the benefit and enjoyment of the people, Yellowstone may have been our first national park, but its preservation kicked off what became a complex network of nationally protected places, a concept replicated to great success all around the world. In the years since my park hopping quest, I've been fortunate enough to visit a number of national parks in other nations. But wherever I roam, I've found there's no place quite like home.
And now, another chapter in the story of these United States. With a top speed of 6 miles an hour, it might not seem like much today. But when the Switchback Railway debuted in 1884 at Brooklyn's Coney Island, it represented a turning point. That's when the American amusement park was born. By the 1920s, 1 million people a day were visiting Coney Island to walk along its famous boardwalk, eat a hot dog from Nathan's, or take a ride on the Cyclone. 100 years later, you still can.
This is the granddaddy of coasters.
But what made Coney Island unique was its accessibility. It was an affordable escape for working-class New Yorkers, and its impact was felt far and wide. Soon, there were thousands of amusement parks across the country. Some of those would close during the Depression. But the industry was forever changed in 1955, when Disneyland opened in Anaheim, California, near Los Angeles.
To all who come to this happy place, welcome.
In many ways, Disneyland was everything that Coney Island wasn't. Meticulously clean, family-friendly. Notably absent were the wacky sideshows, mermaid parades,
3, 2, 1, go!
And hot dog eating contests. Walt Disney spent a record $17 million on Disneyland, a figure dwarfed in 1971 when Disney World opened 5 years after his death. Its price tag was more than $400 million. And American families have been making the pilgrimage to Central Florida ever since. Today, there are dozens of major amusement parks across the United States. The industry has come a long way since Coney Island's Switchback Railway thrilled the masses. The roller coasters have gotten a little faster, too.
It's an American folk song like none other. Lee Cohan explains how this Woody Guthrie classic is all about these United States.
So this is our archive. It's what we call the repository.
Deep in a secure, temperature-controlled vault at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington.
So it's way down here at the end.
All the way at the end here.
High on a shelf,
We'll take it.
sits a relic.
Put it on the shelf.
That's it, huh?
Yeah.
A relic the Smithsonian has listed among the top 101 objects that made America.
How often does it get to come out and play?
Not very often. This is a rare occasion.
It's the test pressing of a song recorded way back in 1944. That years later went on to become one of our patriotic standards.
Feels like you're really in the room with him,
This
huh?
land is your land, and this land is my land. From California to the New York Island.
This Land is Your Land, by renowned folk singer Woody Guthrie.
This land was made for you and me.
This land is your land.
The song turns 85 this year, and gotta say, it's aged pretty well.
This land is my land.
Lady Gaga made it part of her Super Bowl halftime show. And it was the very first song sung in the Oscar-nominated biopic, not about Woody Guthrie, but about Bob Dylan.
This land is your land.
Featuring Edward Norton as Guthrie's good friend, the late Pete Seeger. We all know the words. Most of us learned them in school. Still, there are some of Guthrie's original lyrics that are often left out today.
There was a big high wall there that tried to stop me. Sign was painted, said private property, but on the back side it didn't say nothing. This land was made for you and me.
This is an America that is for me and for you, but we also have some troubles.
Maureen Loughran, the director and curator of Smithsonian Folkways recordings, sees Guthrie's song as historic because it's a commentary on the responsibilities of democracy.
If we're all in this project of making this nation, how do we look out for each other?
Let us all be grateful.
By most accounts, Guthrie wrote it in response to Irving Berlin's God Bless America.
God bless America.
In fact, his original title was God Blessed America before he crossed it out.
So one is in the past with perhaps frustration, anger, all these emotional feelings, versus this land is made for you and me. This is a positive way forward.
That's Woody's granddaughter, Anna Canoni. And before us is Woody's handwritten lyrics to This Land, just on a simple piece of loose-leaf paper.
There is like a power to the original document.
A reverence kind of that comes from it.
That I find very moving.
We met at the Woody Guthrie Center in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a treasure trove of lyrics and drawings and performances that all draw visitors to this point, to read for themselves what they might have been singing all their lives.
He hit a topic and he hit a nerve that I think we feel needs to be said again.
Her grandfather didn't dislike God Bless America, but he worried it was too broad a brush, one that bypassed the less traveled roads that Guthrie, in fact, had traveled.
He saw a lot of people crying, struggling, hungry, and he was just very, I want to say more than moved. He was hurt.
That's Guthrie's youngest daughter, Nora.
So he just felt that God Bless America wasn't really telling the whole story.
Yes, and he says, it's because I love the pretty parts that I want to fix the dirty parts.
He wrote about sharecroppers fleeing the Dust Bowl.
I ain't got no home, I'm just a roaming round. Just a wandering worker, I go from town to town. Oh, if you ain't got the do-re-mi, folks.
He sang about migrants and the marginalized.
Why, you better go back to beautiful Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Georgia, Tennessee. Oh, you can't scare me, I'll stick it to you.
Laborers struggling to unionize. He was a wandering wordsmith, born in Okemah, Oklahoma, back in 1912. The town still proudly bears his name, just about everywhere you look, in fact. A folk hero to the folks around here, for sure. One might think that he wrote this land in the back of a pickup somewhere on the dusty plains, but he actually wrote it in New York City, in a hotel room right near Times Square. Now, coincidentally, a showroom for Steinway pianos.
Right in the heart of New York City, 42nd Street doesn't get any more,
American than that. That hotel was just steps from Bryant Park, where the conversations that he heard inspired him to write even more, even while getting his shoes shined.
He was gobbling up everything around him, gobble, 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 and he would digest it, and it would come out. He would regurgitate it as a song.
Jeez. It gets right to the heart of the promise of what our country was supposed to be about.
Bruce Springsteen once called Woody Guthrie's This Land one of the greatest songs ever written about our nation.
Lead us, Pete.
He played it on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial alongside Pete Seeger back in 2009.
As I went walking that ribbon of highway.
And I just started weeping. Every person that was standing there knew the words and was singing along.
The occasion was the inauguration of America's first black president. This land, our land, had never seen such a thing before. But Woody Guthrie's idea that the promise that this land was indeed for everyone was on display that day, being celebrated as true.
At that moment, I looked up and I said, "So that's why you wrote it."
I go walking on Freedom Highway.
And suddenly the song grew to encompass everyone in the country for 6 verses,
It may not be our official national anthem, but an anthem it's become, nonetheless.
This land was made for you and me.
And now another chapter in the story of these United States. Tobacco had been cultivated and smoked by Native Americans for centuries. Introduced in Europe by none other than Christopher Columbus, tobacco eventually became a sensation. Profits from its sales would sustain Britain's fledgling colony at Jamestown and help fund the Revolutionary War. But growing tobacco is notoriously labor-intensive, and that labor was initially done mostly by enslaved Africans. In fact, until the invention of the cotton gin, most Africans brought to the New World worked on tobacco plantations. In 1881, a Virginian named James Bonsack patented the cigarette rolling machine, which helped turn tobacco into a mass-market consumer good. Tobacco companies shipped millions of packs of cigarettes to American GIs during both World War I and II. And by the 1950s, 45% of Americans smoked.
It is a judgment of the committee that cigarette smoking contributes substantially to mortality from certain specific diseases and to the overall death rate.
That began to change in 1964, when the Surgeon General released a landmark report linking smoking to cancer and heart disease. 2 decades later, another report found that smoking was, in fact, addictive. Of course, in recent years, smoking, once considered glamorous, has become increasingly stigmatized and banned in places like restaurants, even on airplanes, where it used to be commonplace.
So I don't like to smell smoke when I'm out eating, enjoying myself.
What about people that like to smoke when they're having a drink and eating?
It's too bad for them.
Today, the U.S. grows a fraction of the tobacco it did 75 years ago. Fewer Americans smoke, and we're living longer than ever. But in many ways, we've simply replaced one addiction with another. These days, rather than reaching for a smoke, a lot of us just reach for our phones instead. And now, another chapter in the story of these United States. When Henry Ford introduced the moving assembly line in 1913, it revolutionized manufacturing. Cars like the Model T could be built far faster and cheaper. By the 1930s, the big three automakers, Ford, Chrysler, and General Motors, employed hundreds of thousands of workers on their assembly lines. But the work was exhausting, fast-paced, and dangerous.
The automobile strike holds the nation's headlines.
And on December 30th, 1936, frustrated workers at GM's Fisher Plant No. 1 in Flint, Michigan, stood up to GM by sitting down. They refused to leave the plant, halting production from the inside. In 1987, Sunday Morning caught up with then 82-year-old Bud Simons, who'd been one of the union leaders at the plant.
Are you scared?
Hell no. I had enough men behind me. I wasn't scared. Didn't have anything to lose but my goddamn brains.
Before long, the strike would grow to more than 135,000 workers spread across 17 plants. After 44 days, on February 11, 1937, GM became the first automaker to recognize the United Auto Workers.
After 6 weeks of stoppage, workers will again turn the wheels of industry.
Chrysler followed soon after, and after a series of violent clashes, Ford finally recognized the UAW in 1941. With that success, union power surged. And by the mid-1950s, 35% of American workers belonged to a union. Today, that number is closer to 10%. After decades of automation and globalization, car makers employ far fewer American workers. But the Flint sit-down strikers secured wages and benefits that reshaped many industries, and in the process helped expand what's become a signature of these United States, a thriving middle class.
And now, a chapter in the story of these United States. This is Lee Cowan. $35 million in 1933, almost $1 billion in today's dollars. That was the price tag to build this. Consider the grandest of bridges, golden in its silhouette against California's setting sun. By all accounts, building the Golden Gate Bridge was really a ludicrous idea. It was too long a span, too high, too treacherous. San Francisco Bay had never been particularly welcoming, after all. It's cold, its currents are merciless, its fog disorienting. But in the midst of the Great Depression, most would have built a bridge to the end of the earth if it paid.
The world's largest single span across San Francisco's Golden Gate rapidly takes shape.
It took 4 years and 10,000 people to get it done, many of them toiling at terrifying heights with only a safety net between them and the water that was nearly 800 feet below.
We used to have to go from one cage to the other on a 2x12 plank up there, 500-600 feet, no handrails or nothing on it. Believe me, it was hairy.
Workers like Frenchy Gales, whom Charles Kuralt met in 1987.
Did you ever fall off? Well, I was walking across one of the cross beams, and a gust of wind coming, I just went off backwards there and landed my tail in the thing, and I was so scared I just stood there like a gopher in a hole.
But you hit the net?
Oh, yeah, the net was in already. She scared the hell out of me when I felt that fall.
Some were killed instantly on the job. Many, many more were maimed by lead poisoning and falling steel objects. The ones who were left each night climbed up there again the next morning.
The Golden Gate is for the West Coast what the Statue of Liberty is for the East Coast. A symbol of freedom, possibility, and hope. Aspirations just as lofty as the bridge itself.
To help us continue the countdown to next year's 250th birthday of these United States, Tony DeCopel takes a closer look at our nation's most enduring document.
Ladies and gentlemen,
it was 1986 when Looney Tunes aired this public service announcement featuring Bugs Bunny.
For 200 years, amendments have allowed our Constitution to grow in the country. The 13th, for instance, put an end to slavery, while the 19th gave women the vote. It was intended to be amended, the Constitution.
That was then. This is now.
You have to go back more than 50 years to find a meaningful change to the Constitution. How long can we work as a country without updating, reviving our Constitution?
Well, the real fear that the founders had was that we would stop listening to each other.
Jeffrey Rosen heads the National Constitution Center in Philadelphia.
They thought self-government was hard, and that crucially requires deliberation and debate.
Before anyone could even consider a national constitution, of course, there was the Declaration of Independence, ratified in 1776, and the Articles of Confederation, agreed to in 1777, a full decade before the new Constitutional Convention.
Why did we need it? Why wasn't the Declaration and the Articles of Confederation enough?
Support for the Constitution and its ratification was pretty slender.
Jill Lepore has written more than a dozen works of American history. Her latest, We the People, describes a constitution ratified by the people it governed and designed to be changed by the very same. In other words, we aren't stuck with any of it. The U.S. Constitution includes, in addition to the 3 equal branches of government and a schedule of regular elections, a mechanism for change to the Constitution itself.
They came up with this Article 5 of the Constitution, which is the amendment provision, which had been insisted on by the people. People were like, if you were going to have a written document, we need to have the ability to amend it ourselves.
In fact, Lepore says, though we often think of the Constitution as the final draft, it was always designed to be a work in progress.
Many Americans might assume that the framers finished their work in Philadelphia in 1787 and thought, great, it will never change again. But clearly they expected it to be revised constantly.
Yeah, they absolutely did. And remember, like, a whole bunch of them refused to sign it because they didn't think it was good enough.
Before the states would agree to ratify it, she says, some insisted on revisions. The result, a set of amendments we now know as the Bill of Rights.
It was a huge debate. There were more than 200 amendments proposed by the states.
This early draft at the New York Public Library shows 12 of those proposed amendments. The final version, ratified in 1791, was whittled down to 10, including some of the bedrock ideas of modern America: freedom of speech and religion, a right to bear arms, and, for the accused, the promise of a fair trial.
The Constitution actually is supposed to be, Hamilton said, it's like a sunbeam.
But the Constitution was also a tangle of compromise and omission. None more tragic than the compromise over the institution of slavery and the exclusion of women from political life. Rosen says there was one concession, though, that James Madison, one of the document's framers, would not make.
He refused to admit into the Constitution an endorsement of slavery. He said the idea that there could be property in men wouldn't be written into the Constitution because they want to leave it up to future generations to eradicate slavery.
Though it took 100 years and a civil war, America at last had what some call its second founding, adding amendments that, among other things, abolished slavery, guaranteed citizenship to the formerly enslaved, and gave all men the right to vote, regardless of race.
This is just an amazing artifact.
Meredith Mann is one of the curators of the library's upcoming celebration of the country's 250th anniversary.
This is the roll call for the House of Representatives. So this is the sheet of paper where they kept track of who voted yay, who voted nay for the passage of the 13th Amendment.
It was just this incredible day. Galleries were packed. They even had women in the galleries. Frederick Douglass's son, Charles Redmond, was in the gallery. And the house just was nearly blown over by the burst of energy.
It's trying to make the promise of the Declaration that's absent from the Constitution real.
Exactly.
It is up to us.
These days, even though the language of the Constitution hasn't changed lately, the interpretations still have.
No hate, no ice in our state. No fear, no hate.
We still reinterpret it quite regularly, and by we, I mean the Supreme Court.
That's absolutely right. And none of the founders expected constitutional change to come mostly from the Supreme Court.
Well, so I find this actually to be one of the craziest
Yes.
facts. The Constitution does not give the Supreme Court the right to determine the constitutionality of a law passed by Congress. They just assert that right.
They did.
Rosen says the Constitution is still the answer to our problems, not the cause. And yet, for the moment, he worries about how it's being used.
Checks and balances. They're in there, they matter. How are they working?
There's a broad agreement that checks and balances are not working now the way they were supposed to. Congress has stopped acting and refuses to check presidents of its own parties, and the courts have become vastly more powerful than the founders anticipated in deciding almost every political question and insisting that they have the last word. So whether or not you like what's going on in our politics today, I think you have to say this is not what the founders intended.
The founders never claimed to have created a perfect country. But in the Constitution, they did try to pass on the tools to build a more perfect union.
There are people who think the Constitution is so old at this point, it has no bearing on the life of our country today. To that you say what?
The Constitution was written in the 18th century, but it was expressing principles vindicated as recently as yesterday's news. The basic idea that a president should not be a king, that power corrupts, that we are a government of laws. These are the ancient ideas of freedom, and every country that has forgotten them has descended into dictatorship and tyranny. It is historically irresponsible to dismiss the Constitution as outdated. It's absolutely eternal and timeless.
And now, another chapter in the story of these United States. This is Bill Whitaker. In 1892, a mixed-race shoemaker from New Orleans named Homer Plessy was arrested for riding in a whites-only rail car. 4 years later, in Plessy versus Ferguson, the U.S. Supreme Court upheld his arrest and made separate but equal the law of the land. But in reality, nothing was equal. Black Americans were routinely denied access to housing and jobs, and in many parts of the country, they were also denied the right to vote and subjected to racial violence. But in 1909, a group of black and white reformers came together in New York City to fight back, establishing the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. Among its founders were Ida B. Wells, the pioneering journalist who exposed the horrors of lynching, and W.E.B. Du Bois, the Harvard-trained scholar who gave the movement its voice through the Crisis magazine. The organization would soon find its most powerful tool for change, the courts. In 1940, a brilliant young attorney named Thurgood Marshall started the NAACP's Legal Defense Fund and began chipping away at segregation in America, case by case. In December 1953, Marshall stood before the U.S. Supreme Court and argued that segregation in America was an attempt to keep the formerly enslaved in as near that stage as is possible, and that now was the time to end it. 5 months later, the court unanimously ruled in his favor.
We are confident that desegregation will proceed to open the door to true democracy for all of the children of our nation.
In Brown versus Board of Education of Topeka, the Supreme Court ruled the separate but equal doctrine in place for nearly 60 years was unconstitutional. While the landmark ruling didn't end segregation overnight, both housing and schools remained deeply segregated by race. It did push the United States much closer to its founding ideals. And that young lawyer who devised the legal strategy to dismantle segregation? In 1967, Thurgood Marshall became the first African American to sit on the United States Supreme Court.
When it comes to bright ideas, why do these United States have the rest of the world beat? Our very bright David Pogue is looking for answers.
If you plot the origins of the greatest inventions in history, you start to notice a pattern. The light bulb, the phonograph, the airplane, air conditioning, the zipper, the microwave, lasers, transistors, the personal computer, the internet, GPS, the smartphone. No country on earth has as rich a history of modern invention as this one. But my question is, why is that? Well, the answer may start with a guy from Ohio. We all know Thomas Edison invented the light bulb.
Kinda. What we like to say is Thomas Edison invented a commercially practical light bulb.
Hal Wallace is a curator at the Smithsonian's Museum of American History.
Light bulb was just one component.
Oh.
He was inventing new dynamos, cables, switches, sockets, meters. If you're going to sell electricity, you got to have a meter. So it's a systems approach.
On New Year's Eve, 1879, Edison gave an unforgettable demo in Menlo Park, New Jersey.
He lit up the grounds, he lit up the laboratory, he lit up the office building with about 100 of these light bulbs and invited the press to come out to Menlo Park and see what we've done. He especially invited his investors.
And that must have been mind-blowing for a world who had not seen these.
When the lights come on, it's almost a mystical experience because these are not candles, they're not gas lights, they don't hiss, they don't smoke, they don't create noxious odors. You turn it on, it just sits and it glows.
So we know him for the phonograph and for the light bulb. What else was there in his portfolio?
Quite a lot. Motion pictures, Portland cement. Occasionally, we also have on display one of Edison's talking dolls, which is one of his famous flops.
The inventive genius whose fantastic mind had formulated the magic of the
There are these two archetypes that people use all the time that are almost always wrong. And they are the kind of lone genius coming up with a brilliant idea and having that idea in a moment of sudden inspiration. That is almost never the case.
Stephen Johnson has written 14 books about innovation.
I'm just wondering, what do you all think?
He also co-founded a new Google AI tool for research called Notebook LM.
Edison gave a lot of credit to the crew. He has a famous line where he's like, I'm not so much a generator of ideas as I am a sponge.
Edison called Menlo Park the invention factory. He employed engineers, chemists, glassblowers, and mathematicians.
He came up with this idea that if you got these interesting people together and put them in the same room together, that you could create a kind of a factory for new ideas. And that's what Menlo Park became.
Today, Americans come up with more inventions than ever.
Introducing the Dingle Dangle.
Genius Litter is a super smart, health-indicating cat litter.
I'm known as the daddy of the Scrub Daddy, the cutest but most high-tech scrubbing tool in the world.
Over the years, hundreds of entrepreneurs have appeared on ABC's Shark Tank.
Two sharks are out. Ryan and Doug have two offers on the table from Lori and Kevin for their...
where they pitch a panel of potential investors.
They think their idea is always terrific. Very often isn't.
including real estate mogul Barbara Corcoran, Kind Bar founder Daniel Lubetzky, fashion pioneer Damon John, and venture capitalist Rashawn Williams.
Couple more.
We met them at the Empire State Building as they were promoting the show's 17th season. As Thomas Edison might have said, genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration.
Anybody could come up with an idea. Everybody has at least a dozen. Really, everybody's got an idea. But building a business, not many people can do it.
Do you think anyone comes in not appreciating that the hard part is still ahead?
Most people don't.
But David, it's not necessarily bad that entrepreneurs don't know how hard it will be.
I would have never done what I've done. Never.
That's a deal.
This really is the big one. If you think about, electricity, the personal computer, the internet, it's all American stuff. So why? Why this country?
The people that founded the country and went against all odds to come here. So we got the cream of the crop of the world.
Are you saying also the pioneering spirit of all the immigrants and all the people that tried things out and bring that spirit of...
And they bring that spirit on, and then you have the top people around the world who left for either famine, atrocities, they made it over here.
Yep.
And they had a goal to make it over here. So they are, first of all, 1% of where they're from.
Yeah.
I think we have to give this government a lot of credit too, because a lot of the original venture capital funds were funded by government entities.
Marketplace where the financial ecosystem
the capital
allows
markets.
ideas to be financed. Venture capital is much, much less developed in most other countries.
And we also glamorize the successful entrepreneur in this country.
Yes, we do.
Just like we glamorize the professional athlete or entertainer. If you start a company, you sell it for $1 billion, you scale it, you're on the cover of every magazine, you're a superstar in this country.
And as for failure...
There's only one answer to this. I have to hire you both so I can fire you. This is so horrible.
In most of the world, if you fail, it's a negative mark on your family.
Right.
And you are, it's horrible. You're the outcast. In the United States, screw it up and you try again.
The real question is, what do the successful entrepreneurs have in common? And I say what they have in common is the ability to get back up.
Yeah.
Take rejection.
According to Google's Stephen Johnson, history is periodically upended by huge foundational technological breakthroughs.
Edison realized that for the light bulb to work, he had to build an electrical grid. But it was the grid that really changed everything, because once you had power to your homes, you could turn on the light, but you could also build a dishwasher, and you could have a television, and you could have a radio.
The personal computer launched another huge round of innovation, and then the internet, and now artificial intelligence. All of it invented in America.
Openness to new ideas, willingness for consumers to experiment, that mix of a capitalist model with venture capital, but government support and academic support, put all those things together, and it's a pretty powerful combination.
This weekend, our look at these United States reminds us that history is always being made. With Mo Rocca, we're off to the People's House, the White House, now under construction, a project swirling in controversy.
In its 225-year history, the White House has seen a lot. If these walls could talk, they'd have plenty to say, as an entire arm, the East Wing, has been torn off to make room for President Trump's ballroom. Change has always been a part of the White House's story. First Lady Jacqueline Kennedy said as much during her famed televised tour of the mansion in 1962.
This house will always grow and should.
In 1792, George Washington chose Irish-born James Hoban's simple yet elegant design in a competition that included this entry by Thomas Jefferson. Our second president, John Adams, became the first chief executive to live there. In the mantel of the state dining room, Adams's words are inscribed. I pray heaven to bestow the best of blessings on this house, and all that shall hereafter inhabit it. May none but honest and wise men ever rule under this roof. But only 14 years later, the British set fire to it during the War of 1812. In 2014, then curator William Allman showed me the remaining burn marks.
Scorching that would have happened when flames were drawn out through open windows and doors and licked up around the tops of the stone.
It was reconstructed in just 3 years. In 1889, First Lady Caroline Harrison complained that the rats have nearly taken the building. She also proposed a major expansion, but her grandiose vision never got past the drawing board. East and west wings were added in 1902. 7 years later, the rotund William Howard Taft added the Oval Office. By 1948, the White House was in danger of collapsing. It would have been cheaper to level the place and rebuild it. But President Harry Truman decided that preserving the exterior walls was crucial to the country's sense of continuity. A blown-up White House is only okay in the movies. Instead, the interior was entirely gutted. Truman also added a balcony, an alteration which provoked an outcry. The current alteration is much more significant. The planned 90,000-square-foot ballroom is nearly double the size of the main house. The president himself has estimated it will cost $300 million, to be paid for, he says, by private donations. And this is all despite his promise that the new construction would not interfere with the current building. The White House isn't a private home, nor is it just some government building. It's the people's house. No surprise, any major change will have people asking a lot of questions.
We begin this morning at the beginning of our country, that is. For this weekend's look at these United States, we focus on the American Revolution, as seen through the lens of acclaimed filmmaker Ken Burns. Here's John Dickerson.
From a small spark kindled in America, a flame has arisen.
To dispel the idea that the American Revolution refers only to a war, we're going to start our look at Ken Burns' latest epic at the end, after the war is won.
The American War is over, but this is far from being the case with the American Revolution.
At the end of 12 hours, Benjamin Rush says, the revolution is not over.
Yeah, the American War is over, he says, but the revolution is not.
On the contrary, nothing but the first act of the great drama is closed. It remains yet to establish and perfect our new forms of government.
It's all up to us to take whatever's been done and try to make what we can of it. I mean, let's just back up. This is, I think, the most important event since the birth of Christ, the creation of the United States of America.
With no trees or stone walls for cover.
With all of the violence, with all of the Sturm and the Drang of it all of the extraordinary people, not just the familiar bold-faced names, but the bottom-up people who did the fighting and dying.
The horrors of battle then presented themselves to my mind in all their hideousness. I must come to it now, thought I.
It's kind of a sun. You know, it has a kind of energy to it, and that's why I get so animated about the revolution, because you just realize that was it, the kind of moment of creation.
If 72-year-old Ken Burns sometimes gets a little animated himself,
the Civil War was fought in 10,000 places.
It's because he's devoted his career to animating, breathing life
Willie Mays first made his mark as a member of the Chattanooga
into our shared past.
Jazz music objectifies America.
By now, the cinematic trappings of a Burns film are familiar.
We think of the revolution as a war against empire, but it very quickly becomes a war for empire.
But within even the most well-worn story, he always uncovers the unexpected.
Our editing room, I've got a neon sign, and it says, it's complicated.
Is that why history is important to study? It's not to learn happy stories about the past, but to sit with
complexity.
That's the whole story. Harry Truman said the only thing that's really new is the history you don't know, which I just love that. David McCullough told that to me, and I just think it's really important. And he also said that doing good history means that you think that it might not turn out the way you know it did.
He was the glue that held people together.
Consider the film's portrayal of George Washington.
These 13 colonies had to come together, and he was the person to do it.
Annette Gordon-Reed, who has a very clear-eyed view of the founders and their flaws and failings, says of Washington, we would not have had a country without him. Help me understand almost the necessity of Washington's flaws.
So the flaws are pretty obvious, right? He's a slave owner in a country that is now proclaiming universal rights and liberties.
Washington was also one of America's richest men, the beneficiary of the work of scores of indentured servants and more than 100 enslaved people at his plantation on the Potomac River.
And he recognizes that in order for this to be a successful venture, people in Georgia and people in Massachusetts are going to have to go, yes, we share some things in common which they had never shared before. They were foreign countries. He seemed to be able to articulate, not just in words, but I would say in deeds and manner and atmosphere, how we were going to coalesce.
Let's put it this way. It's easy to see the American effort for independence failing without Washington's leadership.
Holding our past up to the unforgiving light of the present takes years and an army of filmmakers, based largely here in bucolic Walpole, New Hampshire.
You worked on this for how long?
Well, we decided to make it in 2015, so it's almost a decade since we decided to do it. And for the better part of 5 or 6 years, this is really all I thought about.
Sarah Botstein has worked with Ken Burns for almost 30 years. She, along with David Schmidt and Burns, co-directed the American Revolution.
What is it like to carry the revolution in your head for that long?
It's an enormous responsibility and an enormous privilege.
Although the aesthetics of the film are thoroughly 18th century, the concerns of the 21st are never far from mind.
The idea that government derives its authority from the consent of the governed was pretty radical. It's still pretty radical.
The political and cultural tumult of the decade during which the film was made provide the context in which we, the viewers, will watch.
Is America in crisis?
Oh, I think it's almost perpetually in crisis. We've been always disagreeing, and our revolution is the thing. I mean, this is a civil war. I mean, in our film, not intentionally, but it once we finish, you go, oh wow, there's this admonition. Don't fall out. Keep the union together. Maybe that has some inspirational possibilities in our own difficult times.
I am now embarked on a tempestuous ocean, from whence perhaps no friendly harbor is to be found.
As with all of Ken Burns' films, we desperately want to know, can the stories of our past guide us through a future that has rarely felt so uncertain to so many?
The second sentence of the Declaration is the most important sentence, second most important sentence in the English language after I love you. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's nothing better than that sentence, and it says we hold these truths to be self-evident. There is nothing self-evident about these truths. They've never been introduced in this way, quite this way before, that all men are created equal. Think about where we are right now and all the divisions that we have, how incredibly helpful coming back to this origin story could be. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that we look for, and that by finding our original narrative, reclaiming our original narrative, you have a chance to begin to heal those things, or at least remind people, oh yeah, I'm supposed to be listening to what the other person said. The other person who disagrees with me is not the enemy.
On Tuesday, the Stars and Stripes will be on full display from coast to coast for Veterans Day. In our latest chapter in the history of these United States, Mo Rocca takes a closer look at our grand old flags.
You can touch them, you can feel them. They were there when we landed on the moon, they were there at D-Day. That's the flag of those brave boys.
They are the flags, banners, and kerchiefs in John Monsky's private collection.
Washington has taken command of the Continental Army, but we don't have a Declaration of Independence yet.
Not for another year. Which we saw on full display this past summer at the Southampton, New York Arts Center.
Anybody heard of Gettysburg? Yeah. I took some kids from the Little League baseball team here through the exhibit. These were all flags that went in the spacecraft to the surface of the moon. I said, touch this, put your hand right on the glass. That's from 1860.
His collection spans our country's history.
This one came into Utah Beach.
Conflicts, and this is beautiful. Political campaigns, triumphs.
This is the flag of the 25th Corps that had 13,000 black soldiers in it fighting for freedom.
For Monsky, these flags are equal parts art and history.
They're a visceral way for us to connect to history.
Seems to me that we're surrounded by witnesses.
Witnesses, participants.
Monsky makes his living as a lawyer, but his passion is American history. He grew up in Jacksonville, Florida in the 1960s, a particularly fraught time for the flag.
We had the Vietnam War going on. I was in a Navy town. There were guys across the street shipping out. And we had the Apollo programs going on.
Liftoff. We have a liftoff. 32 minutes past the hour. Liftoff on Apollo.
The time you're describing was not a time of harmony where everyone was sort of waving the flag in unison, right?
I was a little confused that some people were burning the flag, some people were waving it. It didn't make sense to me because it belongs to all of us. I just look at it as a portal to history, right? And that history is what makes us, it's what binds us together.
Monsky's trove of historic textiles numbers over 100 and counting. Whether online, at antique stores, or auctions, it's a never-ending game of capture the flag. And it can get pricey. This George Washington kerchief cost Monsky $115,000 back in 2001. In 2007, he started showing his collection during Flag Day parties he held in his Manhattan apartment.
I added this flag to my collection years ago.
Today, he's hosting audiences on much grander stages. There he was at Boston's Symphony Hall with the famed Boston Pops Orchestra.
When you look at the war.
And here he is at Carnegie Hall, backed by Broadway performers.
Send the word over there. Wait,
We were with him at New Orleans' Orpheum Theater on the anniversary of D-Day earlier this year.
We have that flag with us here tonight.
The star of this performance, this flag that landed in Normandy with American troops in June 1944. When Monsky thanked World War II veterans in the audience, the crowd erupted. You went from these parties, from these Flag Day parties, to presenting this show in front of packed houses.
It's crazy.
I was looking for the word, and you gave it to me.
Yeah, I felt like in the whole process there were people, friends, and then other people that I didn't know that were kind of lifting me up and saying, keep doing this.
And what does it tell you that these performances are sold out?
People are so thirsty for our history and want to hear more and learn more. When you layer an orchestra on top of the spoken word, on top of the Broadway performers, on top of these incredible stories, you get what I call emotional history.
John Monsky isn't just telling American history, he's helping people feel it, one flag at a time.
When I look at each one of these flags, whether it's going to the moon or trying to end slavery with the Civil War, it's a willingness of the heart. And I think we all have that. whatever party we're in, there's a willingness of the heart to make this country do better and be better.
With just months to go before the 250th birthday of these United States, thoughts this morning from best-selling biographer Walter Isaacson.
We've got a big birthday coming up next year, our 250th. Here's my wish. Let's not blow this opportunity. We're so polarized these days that we may not be in the mood for a party. Everything seems to divide us, but perhaps we can use this opportunity to celebrate what unites us rather than stoke the things that divide us, just like we did for our bicentennial after the fraught years of Vietnam and Watergate. One way to do it is by reflecting on our shared creed, proclaimed in the Declaration of Independence sentence that begins, "We hold these truths to be self-evident." I've just written a little book about how the drafting committee, which included Thomas Jefferson, Ben Franklin, and John Adams, went through 4 versions of this sentence. "We hold these truths to be sacred," Jefferson wrote in the first draft. Franklin crossed out sacred and wrote in self-evident. The declaration they were writing was intended to herald a new type of nation, one in which our rights are based on reason, not the dictates of religion. But then the sentence invokes the Creator. Jefferson wrote that people derive rights, and Adams changed it to they are endowed by their Creator with rights. Thus we see our founders balancing the role of divine providence and that of reason in determining our rights. They understood how to balance competing ideals, a talent we should relearn these days. At the signing of the Declaration, John Hancock wrote his name with his famous flourish. "We must all hang together," it said that he insisted. Franklin replied, alluding to what would happen if their revolution failed, "Yes, we must indeed all hang together, or most assuredly, we'll all hang separately." As Franklin pointed out, our life or death challenge as a nation is this: when there are so many forces dedicated to dividing us, how can we best hang together? One way to do it is by reflecting on our fundamental principles, the ones proclaimed in the Declaration's great sentence. Happy birthday.
And now another chapter in the story of these United States. When it comes to the origins of Thanksgiving, we all know the story of the Pilgrims and Native Americans sitting down for a harvest feast in 1621. Though it's often called the first Thanksgiving, that tale comes with a hearty helping of mythology. The real story begins with Sarah Josepha Hale, best known as the author of Mary Had a Little Lamb. She spent decades campaigning for a unifying and permanent National Day of Thanksgiving, like the harvest celebrations long held in New England. Her efforts finally broke through in 1863, after the unimaginable bloodshed of Gettysburg and a turning of the Civil War's tide toward the Union. It was then that President Abraham Lincoln embraced the idea. On October 3, 1863, he issued a proclamation establishing a National Day of Thanksgiving. Presidents continued the tradition for decades, issuing annual proclamations. Until December 1941, just 19 days after the United States entered World War II. Congress and President Franklin Roosevelt made Thanksgiving a permanent federal holiday on the 4th Thursday of November. Back in 1998, our own Charles Osgood shared a Thanksgiving message that still rings true today.
Yes, we Americans have a lot to be worried about, I suppose, and a lot to be impatient with and critical of. and even angry or sorry about. But isn't it just as true that we have as much to be pleased with and happy about and hopeful, yes, and grateful? And most important among these are the people we love, our families and close friends. If we have these in a world where there are so many sad and lonely people, we are the lucky ones. We should be thankful not only for what is on the table, but especially for those seated around it.
And now, another chapter in the history of these United States. I'm Mo Rocca. For millions of people, the year 2026 will begin once a crystal-covered ball, 12.5 feet in diameter, makes its descent in New York City's Times Square. New York Times owner Adolph Ochs organized the first New York City ball drop on December 31st, 1907. The original ball, this is a replica, was made by Jacob Starr, a Ukrainian immigrant metalworker. The event has taken place every year since, except in 1942 and 1943. In those 2 years, revelers welcomed the new year with a minute of silence. During the COVID pandemic in 2020, the New Year's ball still dropped in a nearly empty Times Square. The brand new ball is the biggest ever.
The ball is 12,350 pounds.
Michael Phillips, president of Jamestown, the company that's redeveloping One Times Square into a year-round destination,
This is the 9th ball since 1907.
gave me a close-up look at the ball, covered in over 5,000 handcrafted circular Waterford crystal discs.
They're in 3 different sizes, 3 different puck sizes in round versus triangular, which was the old geometric dome patterns.
It's a self-contained light show with many special effects.
Why do you think the ball drop means so much to so many people?
It's something that really symbolizes releasing what was and looking forward to what's to come.
And in 2026, a bonus. The ball drops again on the eve of July 4th, in addition to New Year's.
From all of us at CBS Sunday Morning, Happy New Year. And yes, I wore this to my high school prom.
As we mark the birth of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. this holiday weekend, our Martha Teichner offers a snapshot of a critical time in these United States.
Now is the time to make real the promises of democracy.
For 40 years, Martin Luther King Day has been a federal holiday.
Now is the time.
There he is in granite on the National Mall in Washington, D.C. But with his legacy and landmarks of the Civil Rights era no longer set in stone, we thought it might be a good time to look back at some events from the tumultuous decade between 1955 and 65.
This is the place where it happened.
And there you are.
Yep.
And meet people who lived them.
Once we die, then the civil rights generation leaders will be gone. There I am.
Arthenia Joyner became a prominent lawyer and a Florida state senator. But in February 1960, Joyner, 17 then, was one of 20 black high school students picked by the NAACP to take part in a sit-in at a whites-only lunch counter. So where exactly was the lunch counter?
It was right about here.
The old Woolworths in downtown Tampa, Florida, is just a gutted shell now. Where were you?
I was about here. Yeah.
Similar sit-ins by students took place across the South. I can't imagine not being kind of scared.
You know, there are things that are bigger than fear. Older folks thought that you're taking a heck of a chance you could get killed. Why are you doing this? Because we have a right to fight for respect and dignity, and we're going to do it. It's time for a change.
Joyner was a fifth grader in 1954 when the Supreme Court ruled unanimously in Brown v. Board of Education that segregated schools were unconstitutional.
It said that I was equal. I was entitled to have schools like the ones that the white kids went to. That inspired me.
1955, December 1st. Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to give up her seat to a white passenger on a public bus in Montgomery, Alabama. What came next was the Montgomery bus boycott. Approximately 40,000 black Montgomeryans decided it was time. They walked or took black-owned taxis or carpooled rather than riding the bus for over a year.
90% at least of the regular Negro bus passengers are staying off the buses, and we plan to continue until something is done.
Their spokesman, a young, unknown Martin Luther King Jr.
We still advocate nonviolence, passive resistance, and...
The man next to Dr. King, with Rosa Parks, was their lawyer, Fred Gray. Just out of law school, 26 years old, he won the U.S. Supreme Court case that ended segregation on Alabama's buses, and by extension, all public transportation. The first of 4 civil rights cases he would win before the Supreme Court. Big ones, by the age of 35.
It was just taking one step at a time. And in my mind was to ultimately file lawsuits would destroy everything segregated I could find.
Fred Gray, 95 now, winner of the Presidential Medal of Freedom, was the titan of the civil rights movement the public didn't see at the head of a march. He was in court. Without those lawsuits, would any of what we consider the civil rights movement achievements of that 10 years have been possible?
I don't think so.
What else was pushing change? Television.
I say segregation now, segregation tomorrow, and segregation forever.
On the evening news, images of nonviolence being met with brutality.
Can we get a doctor? Let us close the springs of racial poison.
The Civil Rights Act passed in 1964. Martin Luther King Jr. won the Nobel Peace Prize, but the confrontations didn't stop.
The screams of the marchers and the thud of the clubs and hoofbeats were carried by television to an unbelieving America and to a determined president.
Bloody Sunday. Selma, Alabama, March 7th, 1965, at the foot of the Edmund Pettus Bridge. This was not the peaceful march from Selma to Montgomery to promote voting rights that King and other movement leaders had spent months planning, staying here with the Jackson family in Selma.
The world had a Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I had an Uncle Martin. They read me bedtime stories and offered me cookies.
Joanna Jackson was 4. Her father, a dentist, and her mother, a teacher, saved everything.
And this is the chair.
This is the chair.
Aware that they were preserving history. The house and its contents have been acquired by the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan, and moved there.
This house, for a brief period of time, belonged to the world.
It opens to the public in June.
History is portable. The history and the message of the Jackson House can be told anywhere, but it must be shared.
Here, after Bloody Sunday, coordinating with President Lyndon Johnson and convincing the federal courts to let the march to Montgomery go ahead, consumed these men. On March 15th, as President Johnson spoke, 70 million Americans watched.
Really, it's all of us who must overcome the crippling legacy of bigotry and injustice.
Martin Luther King Jr. and his inner circle from the Jackson living room.
And we shall overcome.
On March 21st, marchers set off from Selma protected, not beaten, by law enforcement. By the time they reached Montgomery 4 days later, there were 25,000.
We ain't gonna let nobody turn us around.
There
my mother.
you
That's
are.
my mother.
Joanna Jackson and her mother among them. On the 6th of August, 1965, LBJ signed the Voting Rights Act, considered by many the crowning achievement of the Civil Rights era. Lately, attorney Fred Gray has watched as the Supreme Court chips away at it and other milestones. He's devoted his life to making the law of the land.
Do you think the clock is turning back?
I think it has turned back, but we can't give up. We can't look at saying it's turned back and then say, well, I'll give up. We were arrested, we were put in jail, we suffered all those things, but we didn't stop.
Thomas Edison often gets credit for the invention of recorded sound. This is a cornet solo recorded on Edison's phonograph back in 1878. But Edison's attempt to commercialize his invention relied on fragile cylinders, which could only be played a few dozen times. Yes, they were remarkable, but far from perfect. It was Emil Berliner who would find a better way. Berliner's gramophone, invented in 1887, played flat discs instead of cylinders. Early versions of the disc were made of rubber and later shellac. They were durable, easy to store, and most importantly, could be mass-produced from a single recording. That shift from cylinder to disc made recorded music commercially viable for the first time. Yet Berliner's contributions weren't just technological. A Jewish immigrant from Germany, he quickly realized his invention would be of little use to people unless they had something to listen to. So in 1895, he formed the Berliner Gramophone Company and began signing artists to record music that could be played on his gramophone. Though Berliner was later forced out amid patent disputes, his company's legacy endured. It eventually became the Victor Talking Machine Company, and later, RCA Victor. And with the likes of Enrico Caruso, Perry Como,
catch a falling star and put it in your pocket, save it for a rainy day.
and Elvis Presley.
Just take a walk down lonely street to Heartbreak Hotel where you will be so lonely, baby.
RCA became one of the most powerful labels of the 20th century. Which explains why in 1958, when the music industry was creating a statue for its new award, they settled not on a microphone or a phonograph, but on Emil Berliner's gramophone. Yet another chapter in the history of these United States. "250 years ago, George Washington made his daring crossing of the icy Delaware River, turning the tide of the Revolutionary War. But all these years later, would Washington even recognize the river he crossed? On this President's Day weekend, environmental correspondent David Schechter has a tale of these United States, then and now.
Spend some time staring at the famous painting of Washington crossing the Delaware, and you can't miss the ice. It's everywhere.
How did cold weather
become part of the strategy of that night.
It does a lot to impede the crossing and endangers the whole operation, but it actually becomes our shield.
Alex Robb is an educator at Washington Crossing Historic Park outside Philadelphia, which marks the anniversary each year. Robb says at the end of 1776, after a string of losses, Washington's army was on the verge of collapse. But on Christmas, with ice forming in the Delaware River, the enemy assumed it was too dangerous for the Americans to cross. They were wrong, and the cold weather handed Washington the element of surprise. His victory at Trenton was a sign that the war could still be won.
Looking back, had the weather proven more mild, they most definitely would have encountered resistance outside Trenton. A few minutes can really make the difference between winning and losing a battle.
And a few degrees, too, probably.
A few degrees, absolutely.
At the time, Americans were used to colder winters. We know that from things like Thomas Jefferson's meticulous handwritten weather records. But since then, winter has gotten warmer.
Ever since Washington was here, there has been a steady increase.
Jen Brady is a data analyst at the science nonprofit Climate Central. Their research shows that average winter temperatures in the Philadelphia area have gone up and down over the years, but overall, they are now 5.5 degrees warmer than they were in 1970. Today is cold and it's snowy,
It's
right?
cold, yeah.
How can we say that things are changing when it looks like winter?
It will continue to snow. There will continue to be cold in cold places, but there will be less of it.
The best evidence of our changing climate comes from ice cores. Long tubes of ice extracted out of glaciers in Greenland and Antarctica. Eric Steig is a glaciologist at the University of Washington in Seattle.
This piece contains 1776 and probably a little bit of 1775.
Really? So this ice goes back to basically when Washington was around?
Yeah.
Amazing. Inside ice cores are perfectly preserved air bubbles. The deeper you drill, the older the bubbles.
It's this sort of magical way at going back in time. It's a time machine.
The white dots are air bubbles.
Yeah, so like you're breathing a little bit of the air that George Washington breathed.
Those bubbles contain carbon dioxide, a gas that helps regulate Earth's temperature. And for 800,000 years, the carbon levels found in ice cores have gone up and down, but never above this line. Not until around 1800 when they started to take off. What changed at that point to make that spike?
We began burning fossil fuels, and we're doing it really fast.
Since the Industrial Revolution, which began around the time of the American Revolution, our cars, factories, and power plants have been burning oil and gas and emitting massive amounts of carbon dioxide. That has led to warmer temperatures, which can intensify extreme floods, droughts, and fires.
Seems to me it's good for people to understand things have changed and will continue to change and have an understanding of what to expect going forward.
So it turns out, around the time Washington looked out on the icy Delaware, there were two important pictures coming into focus. One, the story of America. The other, the beginnings of climate change. And both continue to shape our world. I kind of like to think about George Washington showing back up in 2026 and saying,
What have you done?
this is pretty different.
Oh, yeah, he would. You pluck somebody from that time period, they would see things having changed quite dramatically.
Before Hollywood history is made at tonight's Academy Awards, Ben Mankiewicz takes us back to where it all began.
Our love affair with the movies, with the idea of Hollywood,
Come on with the rain,
has been hot and heavy for more than a century.
Why, look, you haven't even touched your food.
We laugh.
There.
We cry.
You had me at hello.
Sometimes we fight.
I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
But we make up in the end.
He's looking at you, kid.
You think our relationship started here, but the truth is it began 5 or so miles down the hill, here, in a barn.
So this was a barn?
It was a barn. This is the oldest structure still standing in Hollywood. It was built in 1901.
12 years later, it became the birthplace of Hollywood's first feature film, directed by Cecil B. DeMille. The barn then became the site of the first major motion picture studio. It is now home to the Hollywood Heritage Museum.
Probably one of the most greatest spots is Cecil B. DeMille's office.
So as soon as he gets here, he sets up a production office here,
Exactly,
right?
yep.
Angie Schneider is its director.
A lot of our filmmakers are beginning on the East Coast. You have some up-and-coming pioneers. You have Jesse L. Lasky with Cecil B. DeMille, as well as Lasky's brother-in-law, Samuel Goldfish, who would later become Samuel Goldwyn, and they get the rights to the top play at the time, which was called The Squaw Man.
So Cecil B. DeMille takes his small crew west to Flagstaff, Arizona, but it didn't look right or feel right, certainly not in the dead of winter.
Ground was
Yes,
rock hard.
Exactly. So they went to Los Angeles. You can have an ocean one day, mountains the next.
DeMille then sends his partners a telegram to remember.
Want authority to rent barn in a place called Hollywood for $75 a month. Regards to Sam.
Right.
You have the lease.
We have the original lease agreements. Yes, we do.
$75 a month, DeMille wrote. The lease is $250 a month. So this is not only the first feature film shot in Hollywood,
Right.
it also appears to be the first lie told by a Hollywood
Right.
director to a producer.
Surprise,
Yeah.
right?
That studio eventually became Paramount, CBS's parent company, one of the 5 big movie studios of classic Hollywood.
My paternal grandfather was a guy named Samuel Goldwyn.
Actor, producer, and director Tony Goldwyn.
He's the Goldwyn.
He's the Goldwyn of MGM.
He's also the Sam who DeMille sent his regards to in that famous telegram.
These poor Eastern European Jews who came here with a vision of what America was. These guys were so patriotic and were trying to impart to America and to the world a vision of what it meant, of what this country was all about.
It started with the silence, giving way to sound.
Goodbye.
Then the Golden Age.
Toto, I have a feeling we're not in Kansas anymore.
You talking to me?
The bold innovation of the new Hollywood.
You talking to me?
The blockbusters.
I'll be back.
And then all those superheroes.
What are you?
I'm Batman.
Hollywood, it's an industry and it's a metaphor. And if it is a metaphor, what is it a metaphor for?
Yeah, I mean, Hollywood obviously is a place in Southern California where it all started and has been the foundation physically of the movie industry. But there is a more lasting version of Hollywood, which is a metaphor for the visual expression of our dreams in motion.
Hooray for Hollywood. That's gooey bally hooly Hollywood.
The immigrants who founded Hollywood are obviously legendary today, but they were brilliant entrepreneurs, built an industry out of whole cloth.
Charlie Rivkin is the chairman and CEO of the Motion Picture Association.
It's the freedom, I think, that's particularly unique. We are free to tell stories that other countries would hesitate doing. For example, we told a story about the Vietnam War when the wounds were raw.
I think now, looking back, we did not fight the enemy. We fought ourselves.
We told the story of America's role in the financial crisis.
You have any idea what you just did?
Come on, we just made the deal of our lifetimes. We should celebrate.
You just bet against the American economy.
The fact that we're free to make those stories, and that freedom is what gives us our ability to project Hollywood around the world.
Patty Jenkins knows something about having a movie projected around the world. She directed Wonder Woman with a box office of more than $800 million.
One of the most extravagant sets
Yeah,
ever
imagine
built.
that was
Yeah.
sitting here.
We spoke on a legendary soundstage where Alfred Hitchcock shot Rear Window in 1954.
Could Rear Window be made now?
It could be made, mainly because of Hitchcock, because there was a famous director who already had a track record. Would it be seen? Very little. It would probably end up straight to streaming. It would be a very different world. And that was the great thing about old Hollywood in a way, was that they were taking a lot of radical gambles, and those movies were going to the theater, and that's what you were seeing. So I think there was a sort of beautiful heyday then of like some real art house directors and people doing incredible things got their movies on the big screen and were very seriously watched.
Ever since that first feature film, Hollywood has beaten back a host of challengers. TV in the early 1950s, VHS tapes and DVDs in the 80s and 90s. But this latest obstacle, streaming and AI, feels like the biggest threat yet. Charlie Rivkin disagrees.
In the early days, when there were silent movies going to sound, it terrified everybody. Then became color, and people thought color, it'll hurt the entire industry, but it didn't hurt the industry, it helped it enormously. And every single time, Hollywood not only embraced change, but thrived.
What does Hollywood mean?
The thing that I dislike the most about Hollywood at this moment is the cocky smugness that the story is ended and we know what movies people watch. And so, like, we've had lost for the last many years. Oh, this kind of picture works. I mean, when I first got here to Hollywood, somebody actually said to me, well, drama's dead. And I was like, wow, thousands of years, but now it's dead.
Really? Yeah.
Wow. Storytelling has never changed. You know, it's an intrinsic need of mankind to tell each other these stories.
And as long as we need stories, says Tony Goldwyn, storytellers in Hollywood will be up to the task.
I think you're going to be seeing a lot of great art come out of the years that we're living through right now.
We could qualify you as anxious but not discouraged.
Yeah, and anxiety breeds action, in my experience. You know what I mean? I feel very agitated by what's happening in our world, but I feel as a result compelled to get in there and react to it and tell stories about it.
And now, a chapter in the story of these United States. This is Lee Cohan in the seventh inning stretch. It's an ode to peanuts and Cracker Jacks, and of course baseball. Take Me Out to the Ball Game is as synonymous with the boys of summer as fly balls and grand slams. The song was around even before Babe Ruth started his career. Written in 1908, it was a home run, one of the most popular songs that year. And yet its composers, Jack Norworth and Albert von Tilzer, had actually never been to a baseball game. They weren't fans, which may be why the song that everybody knows started out with words hardly anybody knows, with a verse about a girl.
Katie was baseball mad, had the fever and had it bad.
Then they changed it to
Our late composer-in-residence, Charles Osgood, talked with Andy Strasberg and Bob Thompson, who wrote an entire book about the song.
And the verse is about this girl who doesn't want her beau to take her to fine restaurants or the opera.
She didn't want to go any place but to the ballpark.
Cubs win! Cubs win! The late Harry Carey, baseball's beloved Chicago sportscaster,
Oh, what a sensational catch!
wasn't really bothered with those details.
Hey, me out to the ball game.
He started belting it out during the seventh inning stretch back in 1976. After he passed away in 1998, others stepped up to the plate.
Me out to the ball game.
If they don't win, it's a shame.
Today, whether your team is winning or losing, Take Me Out to the Ball Game is a chance to celebrate the sport itself, not any one team. That's the thing about baseball. It's more of a romance than anything else. And what good romance doesn't have a song?
now another chapter in the story of these United States. This is Seth Doane. They're among the most memorable images of the 20th century, Americans celebrating the end of World War II in 1945. And they had good reason. More than 60 million people had been killed in the 7 years since Germany had invaded Poland. But while Americans were rejoicing, much of Europe lay in ruins. Food supplies were running thin, and communism was on the march. In 1947, Harry Truman's Secretary of State, George C. Marshall, delivered a speech that changed the trajectory of the post-war world.
It is logical that the United States should do whatever it is able to do to assist in the return of normal economic health in the world, without which there can be no political stability and no assured peace.
Rather than retreat into isolationism, he argued, the United States should help its European allies and enemies rebuild. Over the next 4 years, the U.S. sent more than $13 billion to 16 European nations. That's the equivalent of around $180 billion today. It's what came to be known as the Marshall Plan. The impact was stunning. Factories roared back to life, food supplies stabilized, and living standards rose sharply. But some nations were convinced not to accept an American handout.
Communist nations turned the offer down, and with it, an opportunity to participate in the recovery which was to become the European miracle.
That miracle helped create markets for U.S. exports, laying the groundwork for an economic boom back at home, which doubled the size of the U.S. economy by 1960. Truman would later say of the Marshall Plan that it marked the dividing line between the old era of national suspicion and economic hostility and a new era of cooperation between nations. And the countries that received U.S. aid after World War II have indeed enjoyed 80 years of peace and remain among America's closest allies and trading partners, at least for now.
Give my regards to Broadway.
And now another chapter in the story of these United States. I'm Mo Rocca.
Hello, the gang at 42nd Street, and I will soon be there.
In 1942, Jimmy Cagney sang and danced his way to an Oscar when he played entertainer George M. Cohan.
To what do you attribute your continued success, Mr. Cohan?
Oh, I'm an ordinary guy who knows what ordinary guys like to see.
In Yankee Doodle Dandy.
I'm a Yankee Doodle Dandy.
Here's Cohan himself singing.
A Yankee Doodle Die.
While dramatic performances originated at least 2,500 years ago, historians generally agree that the Broadway musical is an American invention. And George Michael Cohan, actor, composer, playwright, and producer, was one of musical theater's founding fathers. His parents, Irish immigrants who became vaudeville performers, maintained that their son was born on the 4th of July, even though his birth certificate says it was July 3rd, 1878. Cohan performed with them as an infant and learned to sing and dance.
The Yankee Doodle Dandy comes home. George M. Cohan, actor, songwriter, and playwright.
Known as the man who owned Broadway, Cohan eventually produced more than 50 musicals and published hundreds of popular songs, many of them patriotic standards. Yankee Doodle Boy, You're a Grand Old Flag, and Over There. In 1940, President Franklin D. Roosevelt presented Cohan with the Congressional Gold Medal for uplifting America's morale during World War I. And if you visit Times Square, you'll see the bronze statue of George M. Cohan, forever giving his regards to the Broadway he helped create.